for at least...
Firemen from 16 stations rushed to do battle with the fire in the disused Australian mercantile wool stores built in 1909. The fire quickly became an inferno, and the brigade's high-tech equipment had little effect for more than half an hour. The 5-storey heritage building was lined with old timber beams that crashed down after burning fiercely. One fireman broke an ankle in the hurry to get clear and was taken to Sydney Hospital. 2 other firemen received leg and back injuries.
We don't want anyone near that building at all.
2 sides of the derelict wool stores are 200 metres long, and large crowds gathered as the walls began to twist along their length from the intense heat and the blast of high-pressure water hoses. Then, the inevitable. An hour earlier, as the fire broke out, commuters in their offices nearby had run to shift their cars. Up to 20 vehicles were buried in the rubble in Piermont Road across from the rear of Darling Harbour Exhibition Centre. The crumpled cars, debris and flame rising from the vehicles resembled a street in war-torn Beirut. Tim Docker has written off his $11,000 laser.
Well, all I know is there's a huge pile of rubble over there and my car's somewhere underneath it.
The Darling Harbour monorail base station had to be evacuated, and firemen say one wall collapse came close to damaging the $40 million installation. Investigators believe the fire started on the top or 5th floor. The building is now a battered, broken shell, and they won't be able to prove it. According to police, 6 squatters were ejected from the old wool stores several days ago, and they're expected to be tracked down and interviewed in case they were responsible for the fire.
Formerly a wool store, it took only minutes for the 103-year-old mercantile building to turn into a raging inferno. The blaze started shortly after 12:30, providing a spectacular backdrop for monorail passengers. Every available fire appliance and police officer rushed to the scene to sort out the chaos around Harris Street and Darling Harbour. Senior firemen knew they had to act quickly to contain what was becoming the city's biggest fire in more than 20 years. Cars parked on the eastern side of the building were doomed. Owners were held back.
Well, get that aerial to work down there if you can. We're off this groove out here.
Police and firemen wasted no time in evacuating all adjoining buildings, fearing a wall collapse. Adding to the danger, explosions from the petrol tanks of the cars crushed under the rubble.
You saw the wall fall down on top of it. Well, I hope it's insured.
Because of the intense heat, firemen couldn't get close enough to have any real effect on the blaze. Soaked with oil from years of holding wool in the heritage-listed building, the floorboards were simply fuel for the flames. Firefighters then tried tackling the flames at ground level. But a few minutes later, the inevitable happened. This fireman, who spent the first hour high in the snorkel, summed up the situation.
The flames were coming up over the back wall of this building, and they were just gushing over the top.
Again, more of the wall came thundering down.
Ready on it?
Firemen simply doing their best, knowing the old landmark could not be saved. Tonight, as the fire still simmers, investigators remain at the scene trying to establish the cause. Steve Barrett, National 9 News.
Likely to come down in high winds. Demolition teams have the job few others want, trimming the unsafe walls with the help of cranes. Firemen will then be able to enter the disused wool store to get at the seat of the fire, which is still burning internally more than 24 hours later. The 6-storey wool store resembled the burnt-out hull of the ship soon after dawn today. The upper floors had fallen into a red-hot mess of twisted metal, charred wooden beams and chunks of brick. A few people had managed to shift their vehicles before being ordered back by firemen and police. Large crowds gathered behind the exhibition centre at Darling Harbour as other sections buckled by the intense heat came down. Firemen believe the cars were empty when crushed, but they won't know for sure till the wrecks are prized apart. However, they say they would have expected calls to police from worried relatives or friends if one of the owners working in the area hadn't returned home last night. A HarbourLink employee seated in the mess room reading the lottery ad in the paper minutes before the main wall collapse can consider himself lucky. A brick hurtled through the glass tile wall close to where he'd been sitting. The monorail station's vital control room was also holed and sprayed with bricks. Had it been extensively damaged, the rail link would have been out of action indefinitely. The Water Board sewage treatment works for the Central Business District received direct hits through the roof, knocking out half its power supply. And there was concern today that the sewage it handles might pollute Darling Harbour. Emergency generators were being organised to get the station operating again. More than 8 million litres of water has been aimed at the fire, and it's still burning. Harry Potter, 10 Eyewitness News.
To little more than a wobbly shell. A slab of Sydney's history toppled like Jericho in a cascade of bricks and wood. Weary firefighters couldn't afford to go home. Pockets of trouble burned all night. Under daylight, the wool store made a stark addition to the Darling Harbour landscape, an ugly ruin on the city's flanks, whose rubble hid more than 30 cars. For fire crews and council engineers, it was still too dangerous to go inside. Forced to look in from above, they didn't take long to decide on partial demolition.
Coming down to a level at which the danger is significantly reduced, which makes it safer for everybody.
This is the shell of the old wool store. The entire area in blue will have to be knocked down. The owners have been given 24 hours to make the site safe.
Then our structural engineers will come in to examine the building, and then we'll know whether the rest of it will be demolished.
Built in 1909, the Mercantile building has National Trust listing. There were plans to turn it into a luxury hotel and shopping complex. Now experts